What's going on, everybody? Thanks for joining us here on the Rift Rewind, our weekly ESPN Esports League of Legends program. We are here every Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time with Arda, Emily, Jacob, and Tyler. Lots to get to. The postseason's winding down across the world, in particular the LCS and LEC. Only a couple spots. In the LEC's case, one spot remains for a team to book their ticket to Worlds as we finalize the summer split and turn our attention gradually, slowly but surely to the 2020 League of Legends World Championship, which we all know by now will be in a bubble in Shanghai. But before we get there, we of course have to talk about everything that has happened, and in particular, the LCS and the LEC. A series of song lyrics come to mind. Some trails are happy ones, others are blue. It's the way you ride the trail that counts. Here's a happy one for you. Maybe not so happy for these teams because we will be saying happy trails, Emily, to certain teams that are no longer in the postseason. And we shall begin with a very wild one, let me tell you, and let you tell us, actually. Golden Guardians, an epic series that left them on the outs.
Yeah, so happy trails to Golden Guardians. I'm actually, of all the teams that we're about to talk about, I'm the most sad to see GGs go because I think they, despite the fact that their execution might have been lacking, I think they were trying to do some things differently in the LCS. I think they were one of the more proactive teams that we had, especially early. And that's it's unfortunate to see them go for me because I think they were kind of bucking the trend of what we typically see from LCS teams, which is kind of like the Team Liquid play style, what FlyQuest defaulted to after, their kind of early aggression didn't work out in spring. Yeah, I really like this team. I know a lot of people have been talking about please keep this roster together because I really love them. I don't know if that will happen because I think, COVID might interfere with that a bit. But in terms of this roster itself and how they work together, I was really, really sad to see GGs go, especially in the way that they did with the TSM reverse sweep. I think part of it definitely came down to drafting. I think a larger part of it still came down to execution. I think if there's one thing that came out of it, Huhi proved that he is vastly improved as a support player. I've always called myself a Huhi apologist jokingly because I defended his playstyle, his mid lane playstyle, back when he was on CLG. So yeah, I mean, I'm actually pretty gutted to see this team go because they were doing a lot of interesting things and they were doing things that were different from the rest of NA, which was, it's sad to see a team like that not make it to the World Championship and see what they could learn from other teams in other regions.
Anybody have any thoughts on that Bard ult in Game 5 that Biofrost threw at the Dragon? What happened there? Was it just a miscommunication? Was he just hoping that?
No, I just think this entire series, right? This entire series, the bot lane for TSM looked like crap. They looked super outclassed, and it was Bjergsen and Broken Blade had a few good games too, but and Spica actually, to be clear, props for the Nidalee
I was gonna
thing.
say, I actually think Spica played well. I think he gets a lot of undue criticism for some execution errors from the rest of the team.
But yeah,
in this series specifically, not earlier in the split.
So bot lane for TSM just looked atrocious. I don't know why Biofrost was subbed in unless he was just popping off in scrims because good lord, that was painful to watch at some points, right? I don't know. Bot lane looks so bad during the series, and that Bard ult is just icing on the cake for me, in my opinion. It's I watched this whole thing and it was just good lord. I know that Double Lift gave up major props to FBI after the fact, but and he deserves it. FBI had a great series. But yeah, I mean, Jesus. The bot lane at TSM looked terrible.
We're going to talk about TSM at length in our LCS segment. But continuing happy trails, Tyler, evil geniuses.
Yeah, so I think the inverse or the reverse of what happens with Golden Guardians. Golden Guardians took a very steady approach to their building of a lineup where EG was much more aggressive in the offseason. Obviously, using that capital to get Svenskeren and Zazel from Cloud9, bringing over Bang. We saw Huni come over after his disastrous exit from Dignitas. We've talked about at length about how they were all in on Chovy from Dragon X, who they were narrowly very, very close to getting him, but Chovy decided to take a one-year contract in South Korea to see if he can win a Summoners Cup in his home nation before testing the market again this offseason. So I appreciate how aggressive they are. I liked how they were they were a team that wasn't just going to settle being middle class. They weren't going to try to get, stay in the glomp of teams. They wanted to be ahead of the pack. They wanted to make big moves. They got the MVP in Svenskeren. They got in Bang. I really do think, and it comes back all the way to the beginning of the offseason, where they really wanted Chovy. Chovy was their number one option. If they get Chovy, who knows where the season goes? He really was that crown jewel that if you get him, everything might have made more sense. Obviously, Jizuke came in. He performed well at times. He looked very good during the spring split when he was on his roll, but that is Jizuke, right? He has months where he looks like the best player in the world, and then there's months where EG's like, hey, we're just going to switch you out for Golden Glue. And I don't want to say it's all of Jizuke's fault. It's the player that you invested in, and that's the type of player he is. And I think a lot of people would agree that when Jizuke was at his best, that's when the EG was at its best the entire year. But I do think it really just goes back to that off-season day where Chovy says, hey, I like you guys. I'm up to going to North America, but I think I want to stay one more year to play under my teacher, my friend, my mentor, CV Max with Dragon X. And I want to see if I can win a title in South Korea. And then, hey, the off season, maybe we can reconnect. So I think for EG, they come into the off season, and I think unless Dragon X, obviously Dragon X is going to go through franchising in LCK, I would be shocked if they weren't, permitted and given one of those 10 franchising spots. But I do think when November 17th runs around and we're doing our free agency show and, Jacob's getting all the wolf bombs, EG's more than likely going to be at Chovy's door waiting to see if, he wants to come around this time. Because I do think with Huni and Bang on the lineup, Huni now a resident, I do think that they're chasing that crown jewel of Chovy or a player like him in the free agency class. So I like their aggression. I like the staff. I like the infrastructure. I think they have a pretty decent academy team with Gyu. I think he's a really special player too, even though he is another import slot player. So if you're going to look for a bigger fish in the offseason, you probably aren't promoting him. But overall, a first good season back from EG. I think they failed their high expectations going to Worlds, but they got pretty dang close.
I think for me, this season for EG was more about the mid-summer swap that they did, to be honest. Like, putting aside, I don't really I agree if they were going after Chovy and then got Jizuke, whatever, but to what you said earlier, it looked the best when they actually managed to maximize Jizuke's playstyle and his ability to split push and side lanes. And I think when you swap that out for Huni, it's a very different playstyle. I'm not saying it's like good or bad. I'm just saying Huni's playstyle is very set in stone. I know people like to say it's incredibly inconsistent, but I actually don't think it is. I think it's been really consistent across his entire career, but the way you execute it and the way that if you do not have a team, again, that's willing to play around that, it is going to look very inconsistent. He always TPs he has an incredibly itchy teleport finger. He always TPs to bot to help out. He always TPs in to help his team. He really wants to play these carry style champions. I actually think the Hecarim game he played against, was it in their second series, was really good and kind of an illustration of how you can play around Huni on a carry. But I think for me, the big story of EG was the fact that they had one play style around a specific player and then swapped it out for a different play style around a specific player. And it just didn't seem to translate as well. And they also didn't seem to have as good of a read on there have been a lot of meta shifts, and I'll talk about this later in the show, but like especially in top and bot that have affected the entirety of the map, and I don't think they had necessarily as good of a meta read with the Huni setup that they'd already put in place to make a deep playoff run.
This season for EG is like fairly positive in terms of like building blocks, right? Like they had to come in and like they took over of all the teams that came into the LCS, they were the only one that didn't have player contracts coming in. They didn't have any staff, nothing, right? Like they got just the spot. That's all they bought. Not like the Immortals Optic ordeal, like where they got some assets and players and staff and everything else. And like I think that like hats off to EG for like building it feels like they built the founding or like the building blocks of something more. And I think that like that will advance. I mean, I have a lot of thoughts about what this offseason will look like that I'm sure we'll get into at a later time in terms of how coronavirus and visas and everything else will affect that. So we'll see like what type of swings people take. But like in terms of early success to build on, like I feel pretty good about EG. So that's my thought.
A lot of people are feeling good about Schalke's miracle run, but that obviously comes at the expense of many teams, one of them being SK Gaming. They fall short in the LEC playoffs, and while many people are focusing on the feel-good story of Schalke possibly being one game away from qualifying for Worlds, which we'll talk about in a little bit, Jacob, now we have to say happy trails to SK.
Yeah, I mean, I feel similarly to SK that I do about EG in terms of like by the end of it all, like they went from I say this with no disrespect, but fewer brands have been, and actually EG was like this for a long time up until recently, fewer brands have fallen off the face of the earth in esports as much as SK Gaming, right? Like this team used to be super relevant in League of Legends back in the early 2010s, 2011, 2012, 2013, even 14, and then it got a little bit of a decline. Then they got the Counter-Strike team, the Brazilian Counter-Strike team, and they were really, really popular for a while too, and then they lost that to Immortals, who started MIBR, and like SK's been like mega irrelevant for a considerable period of time since. And since they've gotten back into the LEC, like my expectations for this year were like basically in the bottom of the bucket. Like I didn't think they'd be a good team at all, and they proved me wrong. So like they made the coaching change mid-split to bring in Jesus as the head coach. They did like the crazy like bring in and role swap folks, which like I didn't have any expectation for, but actually worked out quite well. So yeah, to me like hats off to SK2. I think that they definitely performed above expectations. I think that they are once again a relevant name in League of Legends in a way that they were not their first year in the LEC. And so, yeah, I had almost no expectation for this team, and they made playoffs. Like that's pretty good in my opinion. So happy trails.
Yeah, I mean, I think Crownshot had. I think he established himself.
He's really good.
Yeah, as an up and coming LEC bot laner. Which is really good. I know Zazie didn't have the most fun time against Schalke. He was pretty much not allowed to play League of Legends, especially in the Syndra game. But I think he also established himself and like made some waves a bit. So, and then yeah, the role swap with Genax is really interesting too. So, I mean, I'm kind of like, this is gonna sound a bit mean, but like I'm kind of glad that SK didn't make it, if only because I want to see the best kind of European teams be able to go, and if Trick is not able to go with this team because of visa issues, which we had reported previously, it would have been kind of unfortunate if they had qualified and then not been able to play with their starting lineup. So I think that's another thing that's worth mentioning as well. But this became a pretty fun team to watch, especially in summer.
So call it here. Crownshot's contract does expire on November the 16th. Call it here. He will be on our top 5 free agency board for Europe this year. I can basically guarantee that. I've looked at the pools roughly the past few weeks. I think he will definitely be up there because there aren't a ton of top free agents in Europe, and this guy, like, I think there are a lot of teams that could use his services. I think that a lot of even some of the top teams in this region have pretty lackluster AD carries. So I think in terms of him getting maybe a better situation with more star players around him doesn't seem unlikely. I think that's a feasible thing.
Just thinking of last year's free agency show, like Xmithy and Broxah seemed like a lifetime ago.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, well. That's for another day.
Well, Broxah turned it around, but yeah, sure.
Broxah's fun.
Or no, just the conversation around them and how they were the two top names almost. Seems like a lifetime ago.
This year we'll have Chovy to talk about, so.
We'll talk about that at a later time. Let's keep our attention on the LEC. There we talked about SK, a team that will not be continuing on the LEC playoffs. Let's talk about teams that are. In fact, the team that has already booked their ticket to Worlds, and there is one spot remaining. Of course, G2, they defeated Mad Lions. They locked their Worlds qualification. They're 9-2 since Week 5. They have not lost since Week 7 when they faced the mighty indestructible Schalke. Tyler, what is going on with this team? Is it just as simple as they had some early struggles, Perks had unfortunate circumstances with his family, the team just needed more time to gel together this split? Is there more than that? What are you noticing from this team that just is making them so good again?
Form is temporary, and class is forever. It's a thing of, like, we've talked about this endlessly, and we've had these check updates like every week on the Rift Rewind, like, oh, is G2 in trouble? Is G2 in trouble? And I feel like most of us, a majority of us, have been pretty calm, especially myself, being, no, they're gonna make it until they are dead, until they are thrown down, until they are eliminated officially from playoffs and eliminated from Worlds. You would bet on them every day of the week. They are a team that has shown us that they can play at the highest level of League of Legends possible. We saw them at the World Championships last year. They made it to the finals. They were MSI. They destroyed everyone there. Wrecking, molly-whopping, Team Liquid in the finals in Taiwan. They've played at the highest level of League of Legends. These 5 players have – there's no problem chemistry-wise. We don't have any issues when it comes to pure mechanical skill. Really, it just comes down to the fact that they had a slow start. It was Perks going back into the bot lane, Caps moving back into the mid lane, Perks obviously, having the first few weeks of the season due to, his family, the personal issues with his father. It's a thing of it was going to take time, and it's a team where when everything clicks, where everything needs to happen, when their backs are against the wall, they're a team that has shown us time and time again they always know how to turn on the switch and to play as they can. This is a team that we should not doubt them. They're a team that they have earned the benefit of doubt. There are many, many, many teams in the League of Legends world where they do not deserve the benefit of doubt. G2 is one of those teams, especially this 5-man roster, who get along so well, who have probably the best chemistry of any team in the world, alongside the sides like FPX and a few other close-knit teams, that they deserve the benefit of doubt when they don't look the greatest. And we gave them the benefit of doubt, and as we saw with G2 and Fnatic, when it comes to playoffs, it's a whole different beast. Regular season, especially online, that's one thing, but to actually win in the playoffs, even if it's online, it's a whole different thing. A best of 5 is a whole different world, and G2 in that world is king.
So let's continue the conversation with Fnatic then. Like you said, Tyler, form is temporary, class is forever. The exact same can be said about Fnatic, can it not? They just swept Rogue on the path to Worlds qualification. Their job is not done, Emily. They still have one more game to go. They got to beat Schalke. They got to end the dream run, the miracle run, I should say, in order for Fnatic to qualify. But how is Fnatic playing? This is a different situation. They just were in a slump. A lot of their players didn't look so good early on in this split. What were they able to change around to make them at least closer to the Fnatic that fans would expect?
So how we talk about, like, Fnatic, they really like to focus on, like, a few select picks in terms of how they want to play. I thought Fnatic's drafts in the series against Rogue were really, really interesting. The self-made Evelynn came out. I'm not going to applaud their execution on the Kog'Maw poke because I think it actually left a lot to be desired, but I really draft. I think that this was like, I guess I just really liked, and again, like a lot has changed in terms of what you can pick across the board because of mainly changes to what people are focusing on in the bot lane and then the top lane. Bot lane specifically is really interesting because we see things being focused on in China, like the Jhin that other regions aren't picking up yet. But I liked, I did like the way they played around Senna. I loved the self-made Evelynn. I thought that was great. I feel like people are going to disagree with that, but I really liked it. They found a pick for Nemesis in the counter matchup with the Azir Lucian, which isn't always something that works out for every team. We saw it not work out as well for Golden Guardians, for example, but that ended up being really, really good for Fnatic. And I think some of their issues have been, getting Nemesis on something that he can really kind of pop off on. And they did in this series. And so I think, again, like a lot of these initial playoff games for me come down to how each team is reading the meta and what they do end up picking. And I did appreciate what Fnatic did in this series. I do think if they're going to play that Kog'Maw poke again, they do need to execute it a bit better if they're going to be going up against, say, G2, who they've, historically had trouble besting in the past few years. So I think that's also something to consider when you look at Fnatic going down the road, but they definitely put themselves in a really good position to hopefully make it to that like top 3 spot, so they don't have to go through the play-in. Although, again, not to get on a tangent, there is an argument that play-in actually really helps teams, especially acclimate to the world's meta. So
they've actually qualified for Worlds and they're not going to the play-in stage, so they are directly.
Oh, they did pass the play-in stage?
No, that's.
Okay.
I just wanted to correct myself. It's actually
Okay,
Fnatic against G2 in the winners semifinals,
right, cool.
and Mad Lions are playing Schalke.
So Fnatic
okay, never mind. Forget that then.
It'll be either Mad Lions or Schalke going through into the depths, or most likely.
It will be the
Lions.
winner of Mad Lions and Rogue, or the winner of Mad Lions and Schalke, and then the winner of that plays Rogue. The loser of that match then will be in the play-in, because that will be the 4th place team in Europe.
No,
is the way it works. But
Yeah,
guaranteed is Rogue, because Rogue can get no lower than 4th. That is why they are auto qualified. So they are in what will be the 4th place. Loser is 4th place match.
So let's talk about that. Okay, so just to recap here, forget what I said earlier. Fnatic will be playing G2 in the winners semifinals. They are both qualified. Mad Lions and Schalke will fight it out for the last world spot in the LEC. The winner of that will face Rogue. The winner of that match, like Jacob said, Rogue versus the winner of Mad Lions and Schalke, that team will be 4th place in the LEC playoffs, and they will go into the
loser of that match will be
the loser.
Sorry,
the winner will move on to the top 3. Now,
Rogue
here's the thing.
Top 4, yeah.
Here's the thing. Rogue has qualified for Worlds by virtue of being 1st place in the LEC Summer Split regular season. They have done so by possibly, if they lose their next match, not winning a single series in the postseason, which is kind of interesting if you think about it, Jacob. The fact that you have a team qualifying for Worlds and they lost 3-0 to Fnatic too, so they could possibly go 6-0. I mean, that's unlikely based on their regular season, but there is a world where they qualify for Worlds having gone 0-6 in their own postseason.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this LEC format was thought up when there were less than 4 slots available for China and Europe in Worlds, right? Like, I think the LEC playoff format was determined before the Worlds 2020 format was determined, meaning that I think that it was still thought that only 3 teams from Europe would go to Worlds, right? And then this has had to change. Like, now we're in a position where if you get first, and also it's like kind of unlikely for a team to get 1st place in the regular season. And I would argue Rogue would probably not be 1st place in the regular season if not for COVID, right? Because then they would have had to be offline. There's a lot more pressure. People play differently on LAN, right? Like, there's so many, there's a confluence of circumstances that are very abnormal for this to happen, right? But they are guaranteed to make it in. They can be no lower than 4th, which means, even if they lose this next series, they'll be at the World's play-in. To me, it's kind of just baffling, right? Like, it's I understand. I don't disagree that Europe deserves 4 slots because Europe has been such a dominant powerhouse at the past 2 World Championships, right? Like, they are way more relevant than North America and Korea in the past 2 Worlds. But nonetheless, like, here we are. A team cannot win a single series and end up at Worlds. And I think Rogue's had a great split. I've always questioned, I said this over the weekend on Twitter, I've said this on the show, I've said this on our Pretenders Contenders thing, like Mad Lions and Rogue, I've always had the question of how will these teams perform when the pressure's on? And so far the answer to that in this playoff has been not well. But, you know, for Rogue, like, because of their regular season performance, they're guaranteed no lower than 4th and will be at Worlds. So I don't know. I'm torn about it. I think that they deserve to be there, but I also, I also think that, like, the formats don't match up.
I'll play devil's advocate here. I'll say they deserve it. I know I'm a Rogue fanboy. I know I've been often the proponent of the Rogue Legion, even when they aren't playing as well. But I do think taking online out of the matter, that we couldn't have predicted that we would be in an entirely online league for the summer split. But I do think regular season should matter. I do think having a very good regular season, if you get number 1 in the regular season of your season, you're playing 18 games. I guess it would be more in a South Korea or China where you're playing best of 3s and not just best of 1s. But I do think that having a great regular season like success should be enough more often than not to show that you are worthy to play at the World Championships. Obviously, best of 5s do matter. But that is in when we get to the knockout stage of the World Championships. In the group stage, it's very similar to what you'll see in the LEC and LCS with best of 1s, where it's a lot more of taking that one game at a time approach. So, yes, I do want to see Rogue actually win a best of 5 in the playoffs to kind of show that they've earned their spot at the World Championships. But when there's 4 seeds allotted to the European region, I don't mind that the number 1 seed in the regular season of a 3-month odyssey who finishes number 1 outright to get to spot Worlds. I don't mind, rewarding regular season success over, having a very good weekend or 2 of playoffs.
I can't believe I'm about to say this because China historically has had some scuffed playoff formats. But I think they probably have the most even playoff format in terms of like split between spring and summer championship points. I like that they weight summer a lot more. My thing with Rogue is that I don't think there ever should be, like, not to take away from their regular season achievements, but as you can see from the sign behind me, the regular season is seeding for the postseason. I don't think there should be a world where your regular season performance automatically qualifies you for a world championship tournament without having to go through some sort of playoff victory. I can't say like why I feel that way in my gut. I just think that because League of Legends, again, like we had some pretty interesting meta shifts right before the playoffs started that I think you really had to pay attention to if you want to be successful in these playoffs. And I think that that's actually really important for Worlds qualification. So I don't disagree that like in terms of like Rogue deserving to be here, I think they're a good enough team to qualify as one of the 4, but I don't think there should be a world where your regular season performance automatically qualifies you for a world championship tournament unless it is a world circuit where you have multiple teams competing against each other from different regions.
Bring back the regional final. I get from a time perspective, right? Like playoffs end in what, like 2 weeks, right? Like we have this weekend and next weekend, then we're done, and then we're like these teams have to be ready and to go, or at least the 4th place team has to be ready for Europe has to be ready and to go and play in China on September 25th. That is a huge turnaround in the middle of a global pandemic. You got to get there. You got to get all set up, everything, right? Like that sucks. I would not want to be the 4th place team in Europe in that situation because that sucks to like do that time zone change, do all that travel, go through all the hurdles, right? Like this is why they've been working on visas for the last month and a half or whatever to try to get all that fixed. So this is not a big issue for all the teams in the LEC. But nonetheless, like I wish things were different and we had the regional final back because that would be better to qualify the fourth team, in my opinion. Maybe the third and fourth team, that only 2 qualify via playoffs, top 2 in playoffs qualify, and then 2 people qualify in regional final. I like the regional finals. I like, you can, I think the whole like spring split being useless thing is also stupid, as it is in the LCS, but I like the fact that the regional final used to exist. I don't like that it doesn't exist now, because I think that, to Emily's point, you play enough series that, like, if there was a regional final, you would have to push through it to get to Worlds. There you go. Right? Like, it fixes this problem. Bring it back.
And if we did have a regional final, we would not have the matchup that we will see on Friday be the determinant for the fourth and final team going to Worlds from the LEC. That is Mad Lions taking on Schalke. That is happening on Friday. That is going to be, I believe it is a 12 p.m. Eastern start. So bright, nice lunchtime viewing there, at least if you're in Eastern time, for Mad Lions and Schalke. Schalke, we all know the story. They haven't lost since July 18th, a month of force. And in fact, the last time they lost against SK. They've indicated that with a 3-0 sweep moving into this matchup against Mad Lions. Seriously, looking at these two teams objectively, which team has the edge on paper? Which team has the edge today, momentum-wise, going into this matchup? Tyler, what do you think?
Well, I think that's I think we can all agree on this. I think the team on paper who looks better is obviously Mad Lions. They've had the resume of 2 seasons where they've looked quite good. They've beaten G2 in playoffs. They've had an incredible regular season this time around. But when it comes to the narrative, when it comes to the momentum, it's really hard to bet against Schalke. And I know we talk about God Gilius and God Gilius that and how he's going to smite all these other pretending jugglers at the World Championship. But it's a lot of a team effort. It's also coming down to Abig Dage, Faker Dage. Like he has been so good.
Yeah.
And I remember when he first became a rookie about a year ago, there was all the talk about Larson. There was all this talk about these new mid laners. It was about Nemesis. It was about all of this young talent. Abig Dage just kind of was lagging behind. I remember there was a lot of talk of like why he looked so weak compared to like all these new age mid laners coming out of, the European regional scene, of the European master scene. And they trusted him and they believed in Abig Dage. And now he is playing the best League of Legends career by far. And now Schalke is in a position where they can pull off this miracle one last time to overcome Mad Lions and to get to the World Championship. It's really disheartening though, right? Like you would love to see both of these teams make it to the Worlds. It feels like Mad Lions deserves it, right? It feels like they've deserved it, where they've earned the right to go to the World Championships from how well they've played the entire year, how exciting they've been, how they've worked together as a team to improve as we've gone along throughout the year. But then you have Schalke, who's put around this 1 month of concentrated brilliance, of about 8 months of forgettable nonsense, but that 1 month of concentrated brilliance, is that enough to defeat a whole year of great, consistent results? I don't know. I don't know who I'm even pulling for, because I do think if you're a European fan, if you're just a blind European optimist, and do you want to see the LEC do well at Worlds, I would pick Mad Lions, because as Jacob said, if you're a Schalke and you win, you are turning right around. You're going to China. The momentum that you've had for the last month in your training center, it all falls apart, right? You have to start again. You have to go to the Worlds bubble. You have to go quarantine. You have to get ready for the play-ins. It takes away from that month of just brilliance they've had, where I think if you're going to pick one team overall to represent Europe at Worlds, you'd want Mad Lions. But it's hard to say you don't want to see Schalke at Worlds, because they've shown us in this last month that they're beating every odd imaginable. So let's say they throw them at Worlds. What else can they do? They're playing with house money. That's kind of the fun thing about Schalke, is that, weirdly enough, the rookie team, Mad Lions, where we'd often be like, oh yeah, if they lose, it's fine. It's totally fine. They're a team of rookies outside of Humanoid. Like, they're going to be totally fine. But the pressure's on Mad Lions. Schalke just making the playoffs was a great achievement. It was a miracle. It's something that will not be forgotten in years of League of Legends lore. But all the pressure's on Mad Lions, this rookie team, this very young team that are now having to face God Gilius, Faker Dage, and the rest of this Schalke playing the League of Legends of their life. So it's going to be a fun series. This is basically a regional final. I wish both teams could win, but it's going to be one where we're going to have a really fun story going to Worlds with whoever gets out of this matchup, this do or die matchup.
Super curious to see what the draft is going to be actually between these two teams, because if you look at the way Schalke played, and again they were the first team to kind of step onto the LEC playoff stage. They picked these like jungle carry comps basically with Senna Bot that then Mad Lions picked and lost to G2 with. So I think it's going to be really interesting how both of these teams end up playing around their junglers, especially when you can lock in a jungle carry like that. I think it's actually really great for the way that Schalke kind of got here in terms of how they like to play around Gilius. Whereas I think for Mad Lions, I prefer, and again, like this isn't a like they must play this, but like I prefer when they put Carzzy on more of a standard carry, and have Shadow being on something like, yes, I know he's known for Lee Sin, but there are a lot of champions that can do this in terms of how he affects lanes. I think that is actually the most interesting thing about this matchup. I'm still like edging towards Mad Lions, but I think it's going to be a really interesting series based on how both of these teams approached their first playoff series and what they ended up drafting. Because again, that first, if you compare, I believe it was Mad Lions' first draft to Schalke's first draft, they're like eerily similar.
Yeah, and while we're on the topic of LEC, right, like I do want to give a little bit of props to Nemesis also. He has not been mentioned here, but like this past weekend series was like the best I have seen Nemesis play.
I mentioned
probably
Nemesis.
all
They
year.
put him on the Lucian. Yeah, they found a pick for him.
But I don't even think it was just like Lucian. Like I get that he had to play other things and like it wasn't the same, but like dude actually looked like he means to be on this team. And like he was him and like Hillsong and Blippo occasionally have not had very good years on Fnatic. This has been the reckless and self-made show, right? Like those are the two guys that like prop this team up. And Reckless has really been the only consistent one on Fnatic for the majority of the year. Self-made is really good, but it doesn't happen all the time. Whereas like Reckless made all pro because he deserves it, right? Like he's had a pretty solid year. But Nemesis actually was pretty phenomenal. I was a little blown away by how well he's playing because I was very down on him throughout the majority of the season. I know we haven't talked a lot about Fnatic on this show the past few months, but like, yeah, to me, like I was super down on Nemesis, and I was hoping that Fnatic would maybe make a change. But like, yeah, he looks fine. He looked good. I hope that like throughout the rest of these playoffs and as we move into Worlds, that like it's not just Lucian because that's gonna get really stale really quick, and people are just gonna ban it out. But nonetheless, like, yeah, hats off to Nemesis.
We're gonna talk about Fnatic a lot. We're going to talk about Fnatic a lot moving forward since, of course, they have qualified for Worlds. To end the LEC segment, because I want to move on to the LCS. Earlier in a previous episode of Rift Rewind, we did a Contenders or Pretenders for Rogue and Mad Lions. Really quick around the horn, if you were to categorize Rogue and Mad Lions as Contenders or Pretenders right now, with only one of them qualified for Worlds, how would you do that? Emily, let's start with you.
I mean, I have to pick one, or like I think that Mad Lions had again, like even though they lost to G2, I think they had a better read on what they wanted to do and the current playoff meta. From what I saw, that can change. Like obviously these are the first playoff series, so for me, in terms of contender pretender, it's how do they both come back in their second series? What do their drafts look like, and how do they want to play? Because I think if I'm just comparing like how both teams played, Rogue looked a little bit more lost than Mad Lions. Like Mad Lions got outplayed, but I think they still had an okay understanding of what they wanted to do. Again, like I might disagree with putting like Carzzy on Senna or something and not putting him on a more standard carry, but like that is a team choice, and I don't think they looked terrible with it. So I have a little bit more, and maybe this is just because again I've been the resident like Mad Lions stan on this staff. But like I do think that Mad Lions have the creativity and the ability to bounce back. So and I'm curious to see how both teams do in their series. I do think Mad Lions still looked a bit more comfortable with what they were playing than Rogue did. If I'm comparing both of their initial series.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but like after this past weekend and watching those games, like I feel like they're both pretenders.
Ooh,
And I like
a left turn.
I had
Wait,
been
I
really.
thought we had to pick one as one and the other.
You could have taken every one, I guess.
That's what I did last time, and I was very sad to say that Mad Lions was the pretender and Rogue was the contender. But like, I'm not feeling too high on either right now in terms of, again, like I said earlier in the show, when push comes to shove, can these teams show up? The answer to that question for me right now is no. They cannot. And I like we'll see this weekend for Mad Lions, but like for Rogue, like yeah, they're gonna go to Worlds, and like if they're in play-ins, like I think they'll make it through. I'd be stunned if they didn't, unless they got matched up against whatever North American or Korean team is in there, and actually could beat them. Depends on their matchup, but like play-in should be a shoe-in for them. I don't think they're like considerably worse than any wildcard team, right? But nonetheless, I am not so high on Rogue or Mad Lions at this point. And you know, I think if Europe's best shot right now for the World Championship looks like it will be probably be G2 again.
Let's move on to the LCS. You're watching Rift Rewind, our weekly ESPN Esports League of Legends program, and this is the time of the show where we would be talking about Cloud9 and their dominance over League of Legends in both splits and how they easily qualified for Worlds, and maybe C9 would even be a Worlds finalist. Forget group stage Plaza or top 8 Village Tyler or even top 4 Palace. But here we are, FlyQuest having dismantled them in their playoff matchup, and now C9 are going to have to fight for their Worlds and playoff lives, while FlyQuest have now moved on in the LCS and qualified for Worlds contention. How surprising is this to you?
It's surprising that they beat Cloud9, but I don't think it's overall surprising that they made it to the World Championships. I think a lot of people would have pegged them as the third best team in North America. They made it to the finals of last splits finals, losing to Cloud9 there. I think the surprise is they beat Cloud9. I think everyone, including everyone on the staff, believed Cloud9 was going to run away with the summer split, even when they've looked a bit, a bit questionable at times this split with some of their, picks and trying to be, step outside of the meta, try to create their own thing, try to kind of experiment going to the World Championship. And now they've got to a point where their experimentation has kind of had them miss kind of on what the meta is. We've seen so much Yumi out of Vulcan when it's so frustrating to see such a great player on that, that champion where you want him more of on the playmaking style, champion to get his team going. And I think FlyQuest is a team, as a North American, fan, reporter, someone who wants to see North America succeed. I'm not going to lie and be unbiased here and say that I don't want to see the LCS send teams to the quarterfinals. I want to see an NA team make a run and actually prove that they are worthy of winning a world championship one of these years. Is FlyQuest that team? I don't think so. I don't think they're a team that has, Summer's Cup aspirations. But I do think this is a very solid team. They're a very experienced team. This is a team that I don't think is going to be surprised by a lot of things they see in China. I mean, for two of them, Ignore and Power of Evil, maybe their most famous match was in China. I was there in Guangzhou, China for the quarterfinals of the 2017 World Championships when they lost to SKT in one of the most famous best-of-5s of all time, where they pushed SKT to the limit and almost beat them to make the semifinals. So I said I've tweeted about this a lot, where we have Knight qualified, we have Yagao qualified, we have Caps qualified. We're most likely going to have people like, BDD, Chovy, Showmaker, Clozer, Faker. Those godly mids are all going to be there. And if you want to be a team that even has a chance, a sliver of a chance to make the quarterfinals, you need to have a mid laner that you can are confident that won't be run over by these godly mids. And I don't think people are going to be putting Power of Evil up there with the Knights and the Yagaos and the, Showmakers and Capses of the world. But he's a very, very, very good mid laner, and he's very underrated. He has been consistently great the last 3 years he's been in North America. And I've said this on Twitter, and I'll say it again, that when he came over from Europe, a lot of people were saying he came here for a quick buck. He was only here for the money. He's going to leave like a lot of other Europeans do after their first contract. But in these last 3 years, he's been one of the most utmost professional players I've seen. He's gone to team. I've never heard a bad word about him. Tristan has been one of the better mid laners in the league outside of the Brugson Jensen ongoing rivalry that's going to go on forever.
On bad organizations before the season,
on bad organizations, but
like mind you.
Yeah, so I just want to give a shout out to Power of Evil and the FlyQuest staff overall. I think they're a team that's going to go to the group stages, probably go 2-4, 3-3 at best. But I do think they're a team that's not going to be surprised, and they're a team that with Ignar, if Ignar gets his picks, if Ignar finds holes, he is a player that can disrupt teams that are more or better than FlyQuest are. He is a player that can open up the map with his roams, and we saw it a few years ago in China where Misfits with Power of Evil, they weren't expected to make it out of groups. They beat TSM twice. They beat them in the group stage, then in a tiebreaker, eliminating them from the World Championships when everyone thought, TSM was going to do something that year. So I would not say FlyQuest has no chance of Worlds. I think they have an outside shot of being a dark horse to make a quarterfinals run, but I'm excited to see them there. I think they're a very solid team. I think they have a lot of upside that some of the other North American contenders don't.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised by the C9 win, albeit C9 looks kind of lost the past few weeks, really. But nonetheless, I'm happy for FlyQuest. I'm happy for the organization. I'm particularly happy for players like Solo, and Santorin, who don't really get the credit that they deserve, in my opinion. I think that both of those players are really good, and Solo went to Worlds last year, but as a backup. But yeah, I went to Worlds last year, if I'm not mistaken, with Clutch, right? He's been a part of organizations before where he's done fine, and I don't know. To me, those two guys don't get a lot of love. Santorin is a fantastic jungler. I think a lot of people have been down on him for a long part of his career since after what happened at TSM. And that's not his fault. What happened at TSM, in my opinion, is what happens to every jungler in TSM. You see it happening to Speaker right now. It's hard to play in an environment like that. I'm not saying that TSM is particularly toxic. I don't think that that's the case right now, but the fans can be, and they always blame the jungler. If you're the jungler at TSM, you get the most flack out of everybody. And that's not that's really bad for your mental health, right? And not everybody can withstand that. And I think that a lot of people have been really low on Santorin since he played for TSM all those years ago. And now, now to see him doing well, I am happy for him. I'm happy that his team is doing well because I think he's a really hardworking player, and definitely a rare breed in NA in that regard. So.
Well, one jungler that's doing quite well is Broxah, and Team Liquid are booked at Worlds. And it's funny to look at the LCS summer standings from the regular season, right, Emily? Because it sort of looks like if you look at the final standings of the regular season, it kind of looks in and around, maybe you'd swap out a couple teams here and there, but this is sort of how we would have predicted the spring split to go before it started. Right? The way we were talking about Team Liquid, the way we were talking about Cloud9, we thought that those would be the top two teams, and then the other teams would sort of, maybe not Immortals at the very bottom, but it seems as though the summer was how we would have expected the LCS to go in the spring. But here we are, Team Liquid qualify. What do you attribute that to the most? Is it tactical? Is it the coaching staff? What is it about this team that has been such an impressive turnaround?
Especially talking to Broxah after they got the first seed, I think they're playing a style that definitely wins in North America. I've said this before. I think they need to be a lot tighter on that style if they're going to win with it internationally, because it basically requires, at a lot of points, losing gracefully until you can 5v5. And that's not always a great strategy if you don't know how to do that, if you give up too many advantages. I think that this is a really good meta for TL, actually, and the way they want to play. Mainly because there are a lot of champions in the top lane that are, really good for impact, particularly the Shen. which is kind of the one champion I'm sad LPL hasn't picked up. But I think it's a really good top lane meta for him, which gives the rest of the team a lot of opportunities. I think a lot of the bot lane picks have been really good because of how the support really dictates the pace of the lane. And Core JJ is just a phenomenal support. So yeah, I mean, I think that it's like to compare this TL team to the spring TL team is a bit specious because it's a completely different team, and I think they kind of want to do different things, especially with the tactical Core JJ bot lane. But I still think that I mean, it's the current meta right now, I think, is, unless there are some drastic changes that we see, is a pretty good one for this TL team and how they want to play. I think the big thing is, they go to Worlds, and I think they have to, massively tighten up this playstyle. I think this is a playstyle that wins in North America because of how many mistakes that teams make. Like, I'm not trying to be mean, but it is. And I think that a lot of these faster paced Chinese teams specifically will be able to pick that apart pretty quickly, especially when they have a lot of really strong tops and mids. So that is something that I'm kind of concerned about for TL, because I think they've really found their stride playing this style, and I think they like it, and I think they've had a lot of success with it. So I mean, I'm really curious to see how they do against non-NA teams. But in terms of like winning in NA, they've by far looked like the most cohesive team. They've looked like they know exactly how they want to play, which is good. Like I'm knocking their play style, but I'm happy that they have a play style, and I'm happy that they've stuck with it and it's worked for them.
I feel a lot about this TL team like I did last TL team. I was not TL last year's when they went to Worlds. TL's team last year was a cut above a lot of the North American competition, but like I wasn't like stoked for them to go to Worlds. My expectations were not that they were going to qualify for quarterfinals. The difference is they've traded a passive jungler for an aggressive jungler and a aggressive AD carry for a more passive AD carry. And in the case of Doublelift is a lot more aggressive than tactical, whereas I think Core like dictates that playstyle of the ball. Like Xmithio is a lot more passive than Broxah is, and so I think that overall, when you look at this team, like my expectations aren't super high for Liquid. So I don't know. Like I'm glad they're going. I think they'll be a good representation. But yeah, Emily, I'm happy to argue this.
Emily, I see that look on your face, and unmute your mic.
No, I didn't want to interrupt Jacob, so I mouthed it. You don't have to be paying attention to all the faces I make. I disagree with that a bit, that Broxah. I think Broxah could be a lot more aggressive, actually. I think he could be in his lanes a lot more, especially based on how we kind of saw him play with Fnatic, which was obviously very one-sided towards one of the map. Like, he would basically pick one side or the other side, and he would, like, gank over and over for Bwipo, or he'd gank over and over for a Reckless, and that was actually something I was super curious about whether he would continue. And coming to North America, and it really seems like he doesn't interact with many of his lanes at all. When I was looking at this TL team, what I was really, really hoping for Jensen specifically is that he would find a jungler where he just clicks with, right? Like, where it's just, man, like, I've never seen Jensen have that. Like, I think Jensen is actually really good. I don't think NA gives him enough credit for how good he is. But I've never ever seen him like click immediately with a jungler and have that like insane mid-jungle synergy that we see out of some of these LEC teams, that we certainly see in Korea and China, with some of these mid-jungle combos. Even in losses, like Peanut and Xie look like amazing together, right? Like, so I think it's really interesting that you classify Broxah as like a super aggressive jungler, because I don't think maybe he had that reputation for being in lanes a lot in Europe, but I don't think we've necessarily seen that. And again, I'm not saying it's like super good or super bad. I just don't think we've seen that out of this TL team this year.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tyler.
I was about to say, 2018 World Championships, Gen G, that was the World Championships 2018, the group of Vitality, Cloud9, RNG, and Gen G was the day that the counter attacking, the counter punching, the traditional Korean style died. And we were there. Me and Emily were both there. We watched as Gen G fell apart over that course of a week as the world champions, the best team in the world coming in. They were favored to be one of the better teams in the tournament. Them and RNG were both favored to go deep in the tournament. They come in with the traditional South Korean counter punching style. They play around ruler, they play that late game style, and they got punched in the mouth. And since that day, we've seen a deviation from that style, and we have now, 2 years later, every team is trying to get as far away from playing that traditional old school counter-attacking, playing for another team to make errors, style. It's gone away. Even Gen G themselves have tried to get away from that style, is playing a much more proactive early game with, 3 very strong lanes that can just crush and snowball. And Team Liquid is playing the Gen G style of 2018, just not as well. They don't have ruler. I love tactical. I've been on the tactical train the entire split, and I was correct that they would go to Group Stage Plaza. But alas, he's not ruler, and this team isn't Gen G. They don't have the cohesion of a Gen G. Broxah, for how much I love him, he's not as good of a farming jungler as Ambition, who could lead a team and play that style. And even that perfected style still got stomped out by a Vitality and a Cloud9. So I agree with Emily where, yes, I would love to see that aggressive Broxah. I would love to see Fnatic Broxah, who was one of the reasons why, that style of the counter-punching style died in the first place, of how aggressive Fnatic was during that tournament, where Fnatic and IG, all they did was fight the entire tournament. But now he's on Team Liquid, and he's kind of accepted the fact, or it seems like he accepted the fact that he's in North America. You can play this very counter-punchy style and still win trophies here, and he's not forced to play more aggressive. But when they go to the World Championship, if they try to play this 2018 Gen G traditional South Korean style, they're going to get punched in the mouth very early and very often. And I don't think it comes down to the talent, because I do think Impact, Jensen, Broxah, Core JJ, those 4 players are good enough to make a quarterfinal. And I do think Tactical has the potential to be a player that rises to the occasion, but the style they have now is not going to fly at Worlds. And as we've mentioned, they only have 1 month to fix it, and they're only going to have a few weeks to play with these Chinese, Korean, European teams in the bubble. If they can change it, if they can do the 2018 Cloud9 where they flip on the fly, where they change their style on the fly, where they see the meta, they catch on to the meta, and they can play that more aggressive style, Team Liquid could surprise a lot of people at Worlds. But do I trust them to do that? And I've trusted many North American teams in the past who adapt on the fly, and we've only seen usually Cloud9 be that team. We have a new coach in Jet. He's a very smart man. I really do like the Team Liquid infrastructure and the staff. They have the players to do it. I don't know, though, if they are going to change their entire style that they've perfected over a year. It's a lot to ask from a team.
Don't answer this question yet. Let me set the table first. Which team would you trust at Worlds more this year, C9 or TSM? Let it ruminate in your brain. Let it think in your brain for just a second before you answer here. But we got a big matchup here. And what I mean is, this is not a matchup with these circumstances that we would have expected at all. I think I can speak for many people when I say this is not where we would have expected at least C9 to be. TSM may be scraping through, getting into this losers bracket run, and here they are, possibly in an opportunity to eliminate C9, the creme de la creme for much of the season. And you have these storylines of C9, the new kings in town, TSM, much of the old guard, Bjergsen, Doublelift back together again and looking to reclaim some glory. And the way that they've played this offseason, many people would even say that maybe they were very lucky to have defeated Golden Guardians, especially the way that first game went. So with all the storylines in place and with everything that is on the line, let us give a little bit of discussion here and preview C9 versus TSM, where one of these two teams will be booking their ticket to Worlds. Jacob, when you think about this, let's start with you here. Take it any way you want. I want to get comments from all of you on this. C9 versus TSM. What pops in your mind first?
I am not sold on the bot lane of TSM at this point. I think that there are many people like our friend Jackie Love who would run them over. And I some of the European bot lanes also. I am not like this TSM team. Ugh, it was painful to watch. It was painful to watch the GG TSM series because it should have been GG's if not for like a few throws, like the one around Baron where they like killed everybody at TSM and then decided that they were going to overextend or they got the Baron and then they decided that they were going to overextend for kills and then got wiped, right? Like that GG should have been qualified out, like if not for their own mistakes. The TSM team like leaves so much to be desired, in my opinion. Like, and yeah, like I don't trust that team to do well at Worlds. At least with C9, like even when they aren't the best team in North America coming out of playoffs, like we've seen them make deep runs at Worlds, like the 2018 run where they weren't the best team in North America, Liquid was, and then they went on to be third, fourth in the playoffs, right? Like they went all the way to the semis, and ended up losing, but nonetheless, like playing quite well all the way up till that point. So to me, like I don't trust the TSM team. But also, something we need to talk about is that they don't make it, this will be their third year in a row not qualifying for the World Championship. And that feels like it's going to send off some very nuclear vibes throughout that organization to do something big and hot in the offseason. And I don't know if that's nuke everyone except Bjergsen or what, but like something's a-coming if C9 qualifies out and TSM doesn't.
Now, listen, I know about the whole equity thing, and it would be silly for Bjergsen to even ever consider leaving TSM, but chat seems to think that that's an option.
I don't think
that's giving up his
future.
He
has to give it up. He has to give up his equity if he goes to another team. That is the way the rules work. Yeah. You cannot be an owner of one team and play on another. So
what team would give him a guaranteed shot? Like the only reason he would leave TSM is to win Worlds. If he can go to a team that can guarantee him a spot of going to the World Championship. And I can't think of a team in North America unless, I just can't think of a team that could give him that.
If he was going to change teams, it would have been this past season before he signed the big contract and got the equity. I mean, he was the hottest. Here's the thing. He was the hottest free agent in the entire 2019 offseason on the books months before. And instead of testing the market, he decided to sign a big contract with TSM. He signed a month in advance. No one could even talk to him. So, like, his decision, like, to me, that was, like, he's a TSM guy forever. He will have equity in that organization. When he's done, he can either stay in the U.S. and become a permanent resident, or he can go back to Europe and live a happy life, making lots of money, streaming, doing whatever the heck he wants to do. Like, it's choose your own destiny at this point if you're Bjergsen, and you're going to be a millionaire for, like, from a network perspective because he owns that part of TSM. Like, he's going to be a millionaire for the rest of his life. Presumably if esports goes all well and set, right? Because I think TSM will continue to be on top as a brand. So yeah, like he'd be very dumb to leave, even if they don't make Worlds. So I just don't see it.
Emily, your thoughts on this matchup?
I mean, I think that we saw better adjustments from C9 in their second series than we did from TSM, regardless of their roster swaps. I actually I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but I actually do think, despite like some very visible mistakes, that Biofrost as an individual did perform better than Treats in his series. I think that C9, when they played EG, you saw a lot of shifting in their draft priorities. They did not rely on Ezreal Yuumi every single game, which was very nice for me as a viewer, but also something that I think they should continue doing. I see Tyler laughing. I think, if I'm looking at these two teams, I think that I saw better adjustments from their first series to their second series from C9 than I did from TSM. And now if you're asking me who I have more faith in going to a world stage, qualifying as a North American team, I still have a lot more faith in this C9 team. I've been saying all year the most frustrating thing was that this team could not go and play against better teams because they were stuck in North America. And I stand by that. Despite their end of season struggles, I do think that if this team does go to Worlds, if they are able to scrim against better teams, they should be able to improve with the talent that they have on this roster. So I did like their adjustments. I think that they had better adjustments and looked better in their second series. You can also say that maybe that's because GGS are a better team than EG right now. But so like that's also something to consider. But I do think that C9 looked better in their second series than TSM did. And I think a lot of people came away from that TSM series thinking, if this team makes Worlds, like, we are in trouble because, you know, again, their bot lane is underperforming. I think Broken Blade had some really good games. He had some, like, not awful games, but just kind of, like, mediocre showings. I think that if this team goes to Worlds, they have a lot more to do than if C9 qualifies for Worlds in terms of, you know, the things they have to fix and I guess, like, I hate to use the word potential, but like the ability for their players to learn from other teams from other regions. I think that is a lot higher for this C9 team than it is for this TSM team.
Arda,
Tyler, last thought.
let me set the stage for you. The other European, qualifier match, Schalke versus Mad Lions. Whoever wins that, whoever loses that, I feel like whatever team loses, they can leave with their head held high. Schalke, they had the miracle run. Making the playoffs was good enough. Mad Lions, they're a rookie team. Great first year. They beat G2 in playoffs once. They had, they built up a fan base. The rookies will be better in 2021. Neither C9 or TSM can afford to lose this match. One of them will, but one of them can't afford to lose this match. TSM spent a lot of money, a lot of social capital as well with their fan base and the overall League of Legends fan base of bringing Doublelift. It was a lot to get him here, and the reason why they got him was to go to Worlds. Anything but would be a complete and utter failure. They believed in Spica. They put Spica in this position. They believe that this is the team that they put together, telling the fans, we know you're yelling, we know you're mad, we know you're fanatical, keep Kabe, leave Kabe, we believe in Doublelift. This is the team that we think is going to do the best, and if they don't make Worlds, it's a failure, and they're going to lose a lot from it by just getting Doublelift. What's Doublelift's future with TSM? Do you want to keep him after, assembling this roster and it failing? It's not something they can afford to do, is to lose this match. And for Cloud9, they spent over $1 million to buy out Vulcan. They've spent so much money on this roster. An entire year of pretty much saying, we are the best team in North America, and none of these teams can even touch us in scrims. We've had so many interviews where Licorice and Niski and Blabber and Sven are talking about how far ahead they are of everyone in North America. And if they lose to their rival, TSM, with a makeshift roster that they built halfway throughout the year, and they lose in the playoffs, going 1-2, and failing to make Worlds after winning their first title in 7 years, it will be an embarrassment. They can't afford to lose the series. Neither one of these teams can lose this weekend and leave with their head held high. Whoever loses is going to be trashed upon for the next 4 months in the offseason. This is a match where one team will escape, make the World Championships, and have maybe a hope of salvaging their season by doing well at Worlds, and they will have at least the satisfaction of putting down their rival. But whoever loses, it's going to be a very, very, very long off season, and it's going to be a lot of torment, a lot of fans very upset, and I think Cloud9 should be favored, but with how they've been playing recently, it really is tough. It really is tough, and I know we talk a lot about Spica. I've talked about Spica on this podcast as well, but Spica's played very well so far in the playoffs. They've tried to enable him with the Italy pick, and it's worked out a lot. So I do think Cloud9 is favored, but neither of these teams can lose. They both have immense pressure on their shoulders in this best of 5, and it's going to really come down to those small, minute details to see who can take that first map, who can get the momentum, and if it goes to a Game 5, it's going to come down to pure just madness and pure skill to see who can will their team to victory more. And I'm excited. It's going to be a big series. One of these teams is going to have the worst offseason ever, and one team's going to go to Worlds. So have fun with that, guys.
A very storyline-rich matchup going down on Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern. One of those two teams, TSM and Cloud9, will be going to Worlds, and the other one will have a lot of time to think about what went wrong. Speaking of the mid lane, we talked about Bjergsen a lot on this program in the last segment. Let's continue on with the mid lane conversation, which brings us to our last topic here on Rift Rewind. There is a battle going on in the mid lane for T1. Faker has been watching some games on the sideline recently, and the rookie Clozer has really been closing out a lot of games for T1, assisting T1 in many victories. Look no further than the game against Dragon X, where Clozer played game 1. Faker came in to play game 2, got an 0-4-4 KDA. The team lost. Clozer came back in for game 3, and T1 won the series. Optically, things don't look good right now at this moment in time based on most recent results for the legend himself, the unkillable Demon King. However, the legacy is there. Clozer has been doing well so far. But let's talk about it now. Tyler, let's start with you. If you are the head coach of T1, what do you do with your mid lane moving forward?
All right. I'm Coach Kim. I'm Joe Marsh. I'm in the brass room. I'm in the ownership room making this decision. Man, I love Faker, man. Everyone knows I love Faker, man. He's such a great guy. I've interviewed him so many times. He's such a nice guy. He's such a legend. He's the greatest of all time. He's the best. There's no one close to him in League of Legends lore. It's number 1, and then there's 20,000 miles to number 2. But I would start Clozer, and that hurts. It hurts my heart. It hurts me inside to say that, Arda. It hurts me to say that inside, Jacob and Emily. But if I'm starting the playoffs tonight, and they are starting tonight versus Africa, best of 3, that they need to win if they want to qualify for Worlds without going through the regional gauntlet, they have to start Clozer. And it's not necessarily Faker's fault. Yes, optically, on paper, it does look really bad that Clozer came in, they won. Brought in Faker, they lost. Bring back Clozer, they win 2-1 versus Dragon X team with a very strong mid laner in Chovy. But that was a lot more down to it was a ranged versus melee matchup for Faker, so he was in a disadvantage. And B, effort inted like a madman in that game too, where they kept getting baited over and over and over. So many bad engages by Cuz and effort, where yes, Faker's KDA looked quite porous, but it was a lot more down to the team just not playing well Faker. And yes, that is one of the big reasons why you start with Clozer, because for whatever reason, they are playing better around Clozer. And he is giving you that edge, right? In 2015, the last time Faker was benched for a elongated period of time, it was because EasyHoon was that stable player who could play the mages. He could play the Azir. He could play the Xerath that Faker at the time couldn't play. He was much more of the assassin playing player. I'm going to pick a LeBlanc and just win this lane. And now, 6 years later, it's become the opposite, where Faker is the player that you trust in those, very stable moments, who you want to be, who play that very safe style, where Clozer is the player that you want on the assassins. His Akali, his Aurelia, who he's famed for in solo queue. Like, he can play all of these very aggressive champions, and he brings much more of a different style to T1 that we've talked about all episode long. If you want to succeed at the World Championships in this day and age, you need to play a fast-paced style. And when Clozer's in, T1 plays much, much faster, even with Cousin, who is known to be a much more patient jungler. So I want Faker to succeed. I want Faker at Worlds. I want Faker to win his 10th domestic championship, then fly to Shanghai. And we see this god mid-lane matchups of Caps, and Showmaker, and Knight, and Faker has to be there, right? But right now, there's no other question. Clozer should be the starter of T1 because, quite simply, the players around him play better when Clozer's in the lineup. And that really sucks.
You on Twitter, by the way?
What?
You said that teams that have qualified for Worlds follow you on Twitter. Did T1 finally follow you on Twitter? Because they did not follow you on Twitter when you tweeted that.
No, they've not followed me on Twitter. And,
Well, maybe
T1 doesn't follow you on Twitter?
It hurts. It
Of
hurts.
all teams in all of League of Legends, T1 doesn't follow you.
JD Gaming follows me on Twitter. You know what happened to JD Gaming?
Qualified
They're going
for
to Worlds. They're going to Worlds. Team Liquid follows me on Twitter. You know what happened to Team Liquid? They're going to Worlds. So
I bet
T1
T1 follows Emily, though. I'm going to guess T1 follows Emily.
They do not.
Safe
I
bet.
don't think they
No,
follow
no
any-
one
They don't.
follows
They don't
me.
follow
They don't
anyone.
follow-
Okay,
they
I'm
so
don't
like
they,
the
follow-
least. I'm the by far the least popular person here. Regarding the mid lane, though, one thing I want to bring up is that one of Faker's most successful champions towards the end of 2015 was in fact Lulu. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because one of the things that I know I talked to him about, I'm sure you've also talked to him about this, Tyler, and he's done several interviews where he's talked about this in terms of how he did have to swap up his playstyle for the 2015 team, getting subbed out for EasyHoon, learning how to play Azir in a way that was like a lot more comfortable for him. I know like that it's funny because the next year I remember 2016 he was coming out with this like insane assassin Azir that was like really fun to watch. But I will say this, I've never seen more people upset about best of 3 in a really, really long time, with the exception of some LGD fans last night, and that was a best of 5, and it was because it was kind of a meaningless matchup between Suning and LGD, but putting China aside. So many people, like I was watching the LPL playoffs, so I didn't see this match live. I went back and watched it, the VOD. But all I saw was my entire Twitter timeline just so mad that T1 picked Galio, and that effort had such a rough game to the point where they were like, is this match fixing? Are they throwing when Faker is on the team? No, I saw like some really mad fans saying this. I think the thing that's really important to understand when you have a mid like Clozer, that you do want to be successful, regardless of how well Faker is or isn't playing right now. If you want to establish a lot of momentum behind a mid laner, you pick them good matchups. You put them on stuff they're comfortable with, or in these like Akali matchups or whatever, you make sure that he's comfortable in the 1v1, right? Like you pick him champions he's comfortable on, you pick comps that will make this player shine. It specifically in South Korea and China, stepping into a position like this where you're like stepping in for Faker already invites a lot of ire. So like the team is going to put you in the best position to succeed as possible. And I know they really want to get behind Clozer as kind of a person who could theoretically down the road, I'm not saying this year, but theoretically down the road, become Faker's successor, right? And that is such a hard position to step into. Like, look at what happened to RNG this year with Betty, with Gala, trying to replace the footsteps of UZI, and the fan reaction to both of those players, even after UZI had retired. I think that this is a really difficult position for Clozer to be in, to be quite honest. I'm hoping that people are a little bit nicer to him than what I saw on social media. But I do think that if you're T1, we've seen them do this in the past, since 2015. Whether they've been justifying it as we have this player who plays a very specific champion better in EasyHoon, or in this case, it really more to me, especially with the way they introduced Clozer in some matches against teams that T1 was, very, very much expected to beat, my own KT Rolster. I think that the thing that they want to do is get behind Clozer, establish him as someone who can win with this team, establish him as someone who is kind of the next generation of T1, and that means putting him in a position to succeed with the draft. And to the Faker Galio point, I don't think Galio is a bad champion. The Galio Camille combo is actually very good. But B, I think that I'm not even necessarily defending it in a vacuum here, but I'm just saying in a vacuum that combo is not bad. And Faker's Galio is actually really, really, really good and can take over an entire game. So I do want to point that out. But at the same time, when you see Faker go into these games, they are going to be relying on him to be better. They're not necessarily going to play around him in the same way that they're going to play around Clozer. And I think people should be really mindful of that when they start discussing what T1 is doing in some of these games.
Jacob, final thought on this?
Yeah, I mean, Clozer's in a position where, I think many of us, let's take a step back here. I think many of us, when Tyler broke the Faker news earlier in the year, that this was like basically a lifetime contract, right? Like a lot of us looked at that and thought that this means Faker was going to play forever, but we don't know a lot about Faker, and like I've been doing a lot of interviews about, like, we know a lot, but we at the same time we don't, right? Like I've been doing a lot of interviews with people who have played with him or who have coached him over the past few years for some of our Worlds content, and everyone's like, what you see publicly is this like very blank individual that is not Faker behind the scenes. Like, he is a very emotional individual who holds himself to an incredibly high standard. He is very difficult on himself, right? Like, it's why he's been able to become the greatest of all time in League of Legends. And I think there's potentially a world where maybe not this season is the end, but I don't think we're that far from it either. Like, and it may be his call and not, like, it's my thought. Like, I don't ever see, if he wants to keep playing, he's going to keep playing, right? Even if it's not as much as he's played in entire seasons. But, like, he's also, like, you have to imagine that being in the position he's been in for so long is, like, incredibly stressful. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's any one player in League of Legends who has had as much stress as him. And, like, that's why we see moments like the 2017 World Championship where he broke down and cried because he had put so much pressure on himself, right? Like I was talking to Rabbitstar this past week, and Rabbitstar was like, that's not the first time Faker has cried in front of us. It's the first time he's cried in public, right? Like, in front of fans, right? Like, the dude is, like, mega hard on himself. And, like, at some point, like, I'm sure that's exhausting. And, he did an interview with OGN a couple of years ago where he talked about some of that stuff because Korean culture is what it is, and people don't really talk about their emotions like that as much forward-facedly as people here in the West do. But I can't imagine it's easy being Faker. And so I like when he wants to hang it up, he's going to hang it up. Right?
Tyler literally put out a tweet where he put the 4 most prominent Korean superstars in the same tweet, and Faker fit right in.
Yeah.
If not being like one of the carriers of that tweet.
Oh, he's an icon. He's an icon in Korea. He's a national icon. He's not. I wouldn't say he's big as like Sun from Tottenham Hotspur or BTS, but I think he does fit in that pantheon of South Korea is very prideful of its countrymen and countrywomen who can become stars globally, and we've seen it with BTS. We've seen it with Bong Joon-ho of Parasite. We saw it with Sun of Tottenham Hotspur, and I think Faker really has become an icon in South Korea because he is a global superstar. People from China, from Shanghai to India to Los Angeles to Stockholm, Sweden, they all sing the praises of Faker. When you say Faker in any sort of context in terms of video games, people know it. Even if you don't watch League of Legends, Faker carries a weight to it. That way people know that Faker is a godly video game player.
Mm-hmm.
And
he has earned the respect to be able to go out on his own terms.
Yeah. Arda, I changed my mind. Arda. I'm starting Faker. No, Faker.
Clozer's
starting Faker.
Started. He's in the lineup. He's in the lineup.
Can I just say that I still think Faker is like by far the better player? Like,
it's
really unfair to be saying like, oh, like again, like I think it comes down to like, and I'm not disagreeing with what T1 are doing with Clozer either, because I do think that's what you do. You have a new player, you want to get behind them, you kind of want to like gas them up a bit, be like, you're our next guy, like we believe in you to go in these 1v1 matchups. We trust you to be able to carry a game. Like, I don't think that's a bad strategy. I think it's a really good strategy. But in terms of like an entire player, I think Faker is still like the vastly superior player. And anyone who thinks otherwise is just wrong.
My final point on this is that I do agree that Faker is the better player, but Emily, you were there with me last year in Madrid. Game 4, T1 versus G2. Faker's on Kiana. If Faker even has a decent Kiana game, if he plays a 6 out of 10 Kiana game. T1 win that game. It goes to a game 5. He played one of the worst Kiana games I think we've ever seen in the pro level. And I think that is the insurance, right? You want to have a player that you can trust on these high-level assassins who can play at a very aggressive style if need be. And if you're T1, I think we can all agree on this. If they make Worlds, you play Faker and you have Clozer there just in case. I think having two really good mid laners who can play differing styles could work. I know there's going to be a lot of teams there with one really godly mid laner, Showmaker, Yagao, Knight, Caps, Larson. There's going to be a lot of really good mid laners there. But if you're T1, maybe having two aces up your sleeve isn't a bad idea. And I do think that while Faker is the far superior player now, Clozer does have a load of potential, and we can see glimpses of it. It's far off. And maybe at Worlds he'll take it to another level if they make it there, but I do think that Faker, they're not going to win the World Championship without Faker having at least some part of it. I do think that Faker has to be part of this T1 team in some capacity, in some kind of way for them to win World Championship, but I think that him and Clozer could do it together.
That'll do it here for us on Rift Rewind. Thank you very much for joining us. Of course, the next time we are on this program, a lot more will have been settled in the postseason. We will break it all down and foreshadow Worlds even further on our next episode. Every Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Emily, Arda, Tyler, and Jacob with you. We'll catch you next week.